Right now, as I'm recording this, reports have confirmed that the Canadian military recently conducted exercises based on a scenario that would have been unthinkable just 5 years ago: defence planning against a potential incursion from the United States. While nobody expects a literal invasion, the fact that America's closest ally and neighbour is even gaming out these contingencies tells you everything you need to know about how the world has broken. This isn't just a diplomatic spat. This is the moment a global movement that started with one speech in the Swiss Alps is turning into actual policy. And what I've been reading about this keeps me up at night. To understand how we got here, let me take you back 6 weeks to January 20th, 2026, at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. Mark Carney, a former central banker who had never held elected office until less than a year ago, stood up and said something no Western leader has ever dared to say publicly. He looked at the global elite and told them point blank that we are in the midst of a rupture, not a transition. He declared that the rules-based international order, the system America built after World War II to keep the peace for 80 years, is over. And then the impossible happened. Carney got a standing ovation from the entire room for a speech that was a direct attack on everything the current US administration represents. But the real story is what happened 24 hours later when the White House responded. The message was brutal. Canada lives because of the United States. Remember that, Mark. Then came the threats about tariffs, the demands that Canada become the 51st state, and the insults repeatedly calling the Prime Minister Governor Carney, as if Canada were already an American territory. Most leaders would have backed down because 70% of Canadian exports go to America, and one wrong move could cause a recession. But Carney didn't back down. He held a press conference the very next morning and doubled down, saying, "I meant what I said in Davos." Think about who Mark Carney is. He isn't some inexperienced politician. He was the governor of the Bank of England and worked at Goldman Sachs for 13 years. This man understands global finance better than almost anyone alive, and he is applying a financial strategy to geopolitics. It's called hedging. Any portfolio manager knows you don't put all your assets in one investment, no matter how good that investment has been historically. You diversify to prepare for scenarios you hope never happen. Carney is betting his entire political future on the idea that America is no longer a reliable partner and that putting all of Canada's economic and security eggs in one basket is suicide. What nobody is talking about is what was happening behind the scenes while everyone focused on the insults. Reports are now confirming that Canada has been secretly negotiating what sources are calling a mega alliance. We are talking about nearly 40 nations, including the European Union and the Trans-Pacific Trade Bloc, representing 1.5 billion people. This is the core of what analysts are calling the Carney Doctrine, which essentially comes down to 3 principles. Stop pretending the old system works, build alternatives before you need them, and protect yourself. The logic is simple. When you negotiate one-on-one with a superpower, you lose. But if you show up with 39 other countries behind you, you have leverage. This strategy is already being executed at breakneck speed. Carney flew to India to sign trade agreements. He normalised relations with China to cut tariffs on electric vehicles, and he is currently in Australia to address their parliament. Sources confirm that Australia's Prime Minister is using the exact same language Carney did, stating that middle powers must act together because if we're not at the table, we're on the menu. Both countries are now cooperating on critical minerals like lithium and cobalt to break China's dominance and build supply chains that don't depend on American infrastructure. Even more telling is the new defence cooperation. Reports show that Australia recently sold Canada an advanced over-the-horizon radar system for Arctic monitoring, proving that these middle powers are preparing to secure their own borders without relying on the American umbrella. The administration's response to all of this has been to ramp up the threats, but here is where it gets complicated. The threats are backfiring. Instead of forcing submission, they are accelerating the very diversification they were meant to stop. Look at the political fallout. When Carney became leader, his party was 25 points behind in the polls. After the US threats began and he stood his ground, he called a snap election and won a massive mandate. The more aggressive the threats from Washington, the more Canadians rallied behind him. This proves that fear doesn't create loyalty. It creates the urgent motivation to escape. We are watching the birth of a new multipolar order where middle powers are hedging their bets, building their own defence capabilities, and preparing for a world where the American security umbrella might disappear. The goal isn't to replace America, that's impossible, but to ensure that if the tariffs hit or the security guarantees evaporate, the country survives. The old order is gone, and what comes next depends on choices being made right now. Are these nations right to build alternatives, or is this the beginning of a dangerous fragmentation that we will all regret? Let me know what you think in the comments.